This is section 10.1. We're going to be graphing circles. This chapter, chapter 10, is what we call conic sections. When we say conic sections, first conic section we're going to talk about is circles. So let's suppose we have x squared plus y squared equals 25. And I have a point, and I have the x value. The x value is 5. And I want to figure out the y value so that I can have a point to graph. So I'm going to take the 5 and I'm going to plug it into this equation right here. So my x is squared, so I have 5 squared plus y squared is equal to 25. So if I square the 5, I get 25. Now I have 25 plus y squared equals 25. I would have to solve for y. So I'm going to subtract the 25. And I get y squared equals 0. If I take the square root of both sides, I get y equals 0. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of these points. So this time I'm going to plug in x equals 3. If x is equal to 3, I have 3 squared plus y squared is equal to 25. 3 squared is 9. Subtract the 9. Y squared is equal to 16. Now when I take the square root, remember when you take the square root, you do have to do the plus or minus. I didn't have to do that with the other one because it was 0. Plus or minus 0 is just 0. But for this one, when I take the square root, it's going to be plus or minus 4. So how can we put that as a point? We have 3 is equal to positive 4, or x is 3, y is positive 4. But I have another point in here, 3, negative 4. All right. So we've got some more points we have to find. This time I have my y. I know that y value is 5. So I don't know my x this time. And I need to solve for x. 5 squared is 25. Subtract the 25. And you get x squared is 0. Take the square root, and you get x is equal to 0. Okay. We've got 3 more. So x is negative 5 this time. Be careful when you substitute in a negative number. It does have to go in parentheses. Yes, it does make a difference. What I want here is negative 5 times negative 5, and that is 25. And this should start looking familiar because we had this before. Subtract the 25. Y squared is equal to 0. Okay. 2 more. If I plug in x is equal to 4, I'll do this real fast. X is equal to 4. I have x squared is 16. Subtract the 16, I get y squared is equal to 9. Take the square root, and I get y is equal to plus or minus 3. So again, I need the 4 and the negative 3. And one last one. If I have y is equal to negative 5, and I plug that in, I have x squared plus 25. I square the negative 5, and I'll end up with x equals 0 again. All right, so I'm going to plot those points. I have the point 5, 0, which is right here. I have the point 3, 4, which is right here. 0, 5, go over 0, up 5. negative 5, 0. Go to the left 5 and up 0. 4, 3. 4, 3. 0, negative 5. Go 0, down 5. I also have those 2 points that I wrote in. I have 4, negative 3. 4, negative 3. And I've got this one, 3, negative 4. All right, so when we draw a line or a curve connecting these points, it turns out we end up with a circle, which doesn't look very circle-like when I draw it, but it's supposed to be a circle. So what is the center? What's the middle of that circle? Well, the middle of that circle is right here at 0, 0. And what's the radius? Remember, the radius is the distance from the center to a point on the edge, and that you can see is 5 units. Now what we're eventually going to be able to do is, if I give you x squared plus y squared is equal to 25, you're going to be able to look at this equation and tell me that the center is 0, 0, and the radius is 5 just with the equation without graphing it. You're going to have to graph it too, but in general, if we have a circle with a center at 0, 0, it's going to look like x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. Let's go back to this. If I were to square the radius, which is 5, 5 squared is 25. So this number right here is the square of the radius. Or another way of saying that, if I want the radius, I have to take the square root of that number. So you can see we have x squared plus y squared, x plus squared plus y squared. They're all going to have a center of 0, 0. Let's check the radius. That's the only difference between these equations. So if we look at this first one, remember I told you have to take the square root of that number. Square root of 1 gives me a radius of 1. How about this one? If I have 11 here and I tell you that the radius has to be the square root, what's the square root of 11? Well, it's going to be a decimal. There is no actual square root, so you're going to write the square root of 11. The next one, the radius, is the square root of 12. Now, square root of 12 is actually, you can simplify that. You guys remember, do a factor tree, and if we have any pairs, then they come out as themselves. So this pair of 2's is going to come out as a 2, and I still have the 3 under the square root. So the radius is 2 square root of 3. This one, we have 100. The square root of 100 is 10. And the last one, the radius is the square root of 36, which is 6. Now, I don't want you to graph all of these, but I am going to have you graph the last two. And I will graph this one right here. And I'm going to have you graph on your own that one. So we know the center, so we're doing this one right now, this one. We know the center's at 0, 0. So I'm going to put a point at 0, 0, even though the circle doesn't actually go through there. And the radius is 10, but it's 10 from the center. So if we count out 10 units from the center, count out 10 units, that gets me right here at 10. Alright, so if I count out 10 units going up, I'm here. 10 units going to the side and 10 units going down. That gives me a rough idea of how the circle is going to look. So your circle has to go through those points. It does have to look like a circle, or at least close. Kind of was off a little bit down here. There you go. So that is my circle. If I have x squared plus y squared equals 100, then this is the graph of that equation. I do want you to graph x squared plus y squared equals 36. I'll have you do that one on your own. For this slide, we're going in the opposite direction. I am giving you the center and the radius, and I need to know what the equation is. So if I have a center at 0, 0, I have x squared plus y squared. The radius is 9, but remember the number over here is not the radius, it's r squared. So if I square the 9, I end up with 81. I'm going to have you do the next one on your own. Let's take a look at this one right here. So the center's at 0, 0, so I have x squared plus y squared. If I have the square root of 7 and I want to square it, remember a square cancels with the square root, so I get 7. Take a look at the last one. It's still going to be x squared plus y squared. And this one is 3 square root of 5. And in order to get that number, we have to square it. Now be careful here because we have to square the 3 as well. 3 squared is 9. And if I square, this square will cancel with this square root. I get 9 times 5, which is 45. All right, let's suppose I have x minus 2 quantity squared plus y plus 5 quantity squared equals 9. I want to graph it. Well, if we look over here, this still will tell us, or it's not going to tell us directly the radius, but it will help. I know that r squared is equal to 9, so the radius has to be the square root of 9, or 3. But take a look at this right here. It's not x squared plus y squared anymore. That tells us that it's been moved. So the center is not at 0, 0. No. Now, take a look at this right here. If you recall from graphing that we've done before, anything that's inside goes opposite. So if I have x minus 2, the opposite of minus 2 is positive 2. So my center, my x value for my center is going to be 2. Same thing with the y. If I have y plus 5, the opposite of positive 5 is negative 5, so my y value is negative 5. So that's my center, 2, negative 5. And again, notice it's opposite of what we have for the equation. So 2, go over 2 and down 5. And here is the center of my circle. Now, I do have to graph this circle. I know the radius is 3. If I go 3 units from the center, not from 0, 0, from the center of the circle, so I go 1, 2, 3 units. Go 3 units from the center, and I have a point, and I go 3 units up, 1, 2, 3 units up, 3 to the left, 1, 2, 3 units to the left, and 3 down, 1, 2, 3 units down. So those 4 points will give me my circle right there. So let's graph x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 16. I know my center is going to be at negative 2 because it has to be opposite, positive 3, and my radius has to be 4. So I'm going to plot the center first, so go negative 2, 3, and that is right there. And then I have to go 4 units from that point. So 4 units, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4. So here is my circle. Do this one on your own. Well, no, actually, let's take a look at this one. I have x squared. That's the same as x minus 0 squared. Y plus 1. squared equals 4. So what would the center be? Well, the center for the x is going to be 0, and for the y, -1, radius of 2, and I will have you graph that on your own. And graph this one and this one. And let's take a look at this. We'll do a couple of these. So we need to write the equation now. So to write an equation, we need to know what the center is, and we need to know what the radius is. So we need circle 1, which is this right here. It's centered at 0, 0, so that gives me x squared plus y squared. X squared plus y squared. I need to know the radius. The radius is 2 units. So square the 2 and I get 4. All right, let's take a look at, have you do 2 on your own. Let's take a look at number 3. You need to find the center of the circle. Be careful. It has to actually be at the center. Need to figure out what that point is. Well, that's the point 3, 6. 3, 6. Remember, when you're writing the equation and it's in the parentheses, it has to be opposite. The opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. The opposite of positive 6 is negative 6. And also, the x has to go with the x, the y has to go with the y. So make sure you remember that. Find the radius. It looks like it is 1, 2, 3 units. Square the 3 and I get 9. So I want you to do the rest of these on your own and let me know if you have questions in class.